was looking back. Elena feels her heart race as she considers the implications, the weight of discovery pressing down upon her shoulders. Elena asks the question that has haunted her since the signal first arrived, the question she has rehearsed 1,000 times in her sleepless nights. Why us? We are so small, so young as a civilization. There were closer civilizations, older ones, louder signals. Why humanity? They hear about a lonely commander who answered a call from the unknown, who chose courage over fear, who understood that the greatest risk in the universe is not reaching out but never reaching at all. Her answer changed everything, for all species, for all time. Her name is Agnes Finch. She lives in the village, at the foot of Harrow Hill. Webb made a note. Then he turned to Richard. Your wife disappeared, and yet you show no emotion. Why? Richard met his gaze. Because Eleanor was already gone long before she vanished. She filed for divorce last month. She was leaving me for another man. The room fell deathly silent. Harold's face went gray. Eleanor continued, I caught the edge of the cliff and pulled myself up. I was bruised and terrified. But I knew if I accused you, no one would believe me. The butler? Pushing the famous author off a cliff? It was the perfect murder that never happened. Sophie arrived at the end of a dusty gravel road, the July sun scorching her shoulders. Before her stood Villa Rosa, a crumbling estate wrapped in overgrown vines, wildflowers choking the terrace. Her grandmother's letter was clutched in her trembling hand. I leave you everything, Elena had written, even the parts I could never give you. The hostility did not vanish overnight, but it softened. Marco began to appear at the property line with bottles of his wine, explaining that the 2018 vintage was not yet ready but the 2016 was exceptional. He showed her how to check the soil's moisture, how to listen to the vines for signs of distress. Sophie learned that his bluntness was not cruelty, but a shield for a tender heart. Marco was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady. My grandfather left me a small trust, he said, for the preservation of the land. I have been looking for a partner to help revive the vineyard, someone who cares about the soil, the tradition, the story. He turned to look at her, his dark eyes holding hers. I think he sent you to me. Years passed, as years do in Tuscany, with the slow, sweet patience of wine aging in oak. Sophie and Marco grew old together, their hands weathered and intertwined, their love deepened by every season. The vineyard flourished, winning awards and the devotion of lovers of wine around the world. But more importantly, it remained a home, filled with the sound of children and grandchildren who ran where Sophie and Marco had once walked. To master it, Aldrich was old, his beard white as snow, but his eyes burned with an intensity that made Kira think of banked coals waiting to be fanned. He had been seeking a new pupil for 7 years, traveling the length and breadth of the known world, and when he felt the resonance of her awakening from 200 leagues away, he had known his search was over. Kira's father, after a long intense conversation that took place in the forge house while Kira was sent to gather water from the begun to corrupt the surrounding earth. The King's Council had summoned every able dragon weaver to the capital. The time that the Academy had feared was coming. The journey to the capital took 12 days by fast horse, and Kira traveled with Aldrich, Thessaly, and 6 of the Academy's strongest students, including Marcus, Yara, and Theron. The roads were busier than usual, filled with refugees from the eastern provinces where strange lights had been seen in the night sky and crops had begun to who inherited her copper hair and her father's dark eyes. But every winter solstice, when the longest night fell over the realm, Kira climbed to the top of the highest hill outside Ironhall and looked toward the distant capital. She could not feel the ley lines anymore, could not sense the pulse of the world's ancient magic. But she knew, with a certainty that required no supernatural gift, that the prison held, that the darkness remained bound, and that somewhere, in the halls of the twilight, she moved through the foyer, camera flash firing in bursts. Portraits lined the walls. The Ashworth family stared back with painted eyes that seemed to follow her. The father's mouth was a thin, knowing line. The mother's hands were clasped too tightly around her children's shoulders. Sarah closed the journal. The warmth of the wood beneath her palm, the breathing in the walls, none of it fit a lie. She needed the basement. Whatever Harrison had opened down there, the answer was below. She found the basement door behind the kitchen, concealed behind a rotted panel. The white door sealed into solid wall behind her. The rocking horse began to move slow, then faster, then violent. A child's giggle echoed from the crib. Sarah backed away as the crib's railing splintered, tiny hands pressing against the rotting wood from inside. She ran. A door appeared ahead. It reached for her with hands that had too many joints. Sarah threw herself backward and the thing lunged, passing through her like ice water, like every nerve threaded with wire. She felt it inside her, reading her, tasting the grief she carried like stones in her chest. It laughed with a voice like breaking glass. This was by her side, his grin wider than ever. "I knew you were more than a quiet camel." He punched her arm gently. "We make a good team, you and I." For the first time since leaving Chang'an, Mei Lin felt she had found her place in the world. The caravan pressed on toward Constantinople, the great city at the edge of the known world. But each day grew more tense. Hassan's suspicions festered. On the 9th day, he confronted Mei Lin openly, in front of the entire caravan. "She is a woman," he shouted. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The disguise was over. His phone buzzed. A text from Director Sarah Mitchell, office. "Now, bring no one." The summons was unusual. Midnight was rarely a good time for meetings. Jack turned back toward the building, his instincts already sharpening. Eleanor stepped into the room, her gaze fixed on Harold Finch. "You sent my money to your wife. You told her where I was. And when I confronted you, you threatened to kill me if I exposed your theft." Harold's face twisted. "I never meant." "Eleanor, please." Eleanor held up her hand. "I know you didn't mean to kill me, but you pushed me, Harold." Destroyed. He had merely been bound, his spirit locked within a prison of black iron and elder stone in the deepest vault beneath the capital city of Valdres Keep. And in the centuries since, the bindings had been weakening slowly but surely, as the magic that maintained them faded with each generation. The Twilight Academy existed precisely to prevent his return. The Seekers trained dragon weavers in secret, searching for those with the gift, hoping to build an order strong enough to hold the be disappointed, to mourn the loss of her potential. Instead, he crossed the room, sat on the edge of her bed, and took her hand in his. "You saved the world," he said quietly. "You are not less than you were. You are more. And when you return to Iron Hall and take up your father's hammer, you will shape blades that carry the memory of what you did here, and that memory will be worth more than any magic." Kira returned to Iron Hall in the spring, when the snow had melted from the mountain paths and the cave system is a labyrinth of passages and chambers. Chen marks their path on a string, but even so, they become lost twice. Marcus triggers a trap, a rain of darts from the ceiling. He falls, convulsing. Elena rushes to him, but there is nothing to be done. The poison works too fast. Marcus dies in James's arms. The door is covered in solar symbols, a massive sun disk at the center, surrounded by planets and stars. Elena studies the mechanism. 7 golden discs, each inscribed with a different celestial symbol, must be pressed in the correct order to open the door. She works out the sequence. One by one, the discs click into place. The journey back is as dangerous as the journey in. They retrace their steps through the cave, avoiding the pit trap and the pressure plates. Chen cuts his arm on a sharp rock but keeps walking. They emerge from the cave into jungle light and breathe fresh air for the first time in days. But the jungle does not keep secrets forever. Erosion exposes new ruins every year. Floods reveal artifacts that have lain hidden for centuries. And men like James Falconer, men driven by curiosity, by ambition, by the desire to understand our past, will always find a way to uncover what has been buried. The weeks that followed were a blur of secrets and stolen moments. I learned to move through the tunnels like a ghost, never missing a shift at the plant, never raising suspicion. Vera trained me in combat, in infiltration, in the art of staying invisible. The council has eyes everywhere, she warned. Trust no one, not even your own shadow. They dragged me away, but it was too late. The dome was cracking, not just the one I'd found, but the walls inside people's minds. In the underbelly, Vera was already mobilizing. In Sector 7, citizens were stepping into the streets, looking up at that fake blue sky with new eyes. The lie was dying, and for the first time in a century, the future was uncertain and free. Jace found me the day before I planned to leave. He looked different somehow, the skepticism gone from his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have believed you. I should have listened." I forgave him. There was no room for old grudges in a world being reborn. We sat together as the sun set over the horizon, the first sunset either of us had ever seen. Vera and I became those messengers. We traveled from dome to dome, making contact with hidden resistance cells, sharing what we'd learned. Some domes were more fortified than others, their citizens more thoroughly brainwashed. But everywhere we went, we found people like me, people who looked at the fake sky and wondered if there was something more. They were waiting. They just needed someone to show them the way. It was painful and slow and deeply necessary. Voss himself testified for days, his voice cracking as he explained his own fear, his own small-mindedness. He was not a monster. He was a man who had made monstrous choices. That was worse, somehow, and more human. A week passed. He walked each day to the bog, to the sea cliffs a mile north, along the lane to the old stone bridge where he and Sean had once fished for brown trout and caught only stones and their own laughter. His knees ached. His back protested. His body, at 70, was no longer the one he identified with. Inside it, he still felt 25, standing at this same bridge, waiting for his life to begin. One afternoon, he climbed the hill behind the cottage, a small mountain really, that he had climbed as a boy with a sense of invincible adventure. His knees screamed. He stopped twice to rest. But when he reached the top, the view stopped him too, the whole peninsula laid out like a map, the two lakes catching the low sun, the distant smudge of the town, the gray ribbon of sea. He sat on the grass and wept, not from grief, from the extraordinary ordinary beauty of being alive to see it. James understands now. Fawcett took the Son of Z, and it drove him mad. He saw visions, heard voices. His companions died not from jungle disease but from his madness. The artifact was never meant to leave the temple. James carefully returns it to the sarcophagus. Some treasures are better left untouched. James Falconer knew. He chose to return the Son of Z, to let the king rest in peace. In doing so, he may have doomed the civilization to continued obscurity, but he saved himself and his companions from the curse that killed Fawcett. The question remains, was it worth it? Would the world be better or worse if the truth were known? In her final entry, dated 3 days before her death, Eleanor wrote, "I am going back to the city. I do not know why, but I feel compelled to return what was taken. The Son of Z must be returned to its place, or the cycle will never be broken. Perhaps this is madness. Perhaps this is my destiny. I said nothing. I thought of Vera's training, of Theo waiting in the dark, of all the people who were counting on me. The interrogators' faces hardened. They had other methods, they warned. Pain, isolation, techniques that left no marks but shattered the mind. Still, I said nothing. I had nothing to give. They didn't know about Jace. They didn't know about my mother. I could endure whatever they threw at me. Once, if I was scared during those first days after the broadcast, I told him the truth. I was terrified. But fear and courage are not opposites. Courage is fear and action anyway. It is choosing to move forward when every instinct screams to stay still. Every person who stepped out of the dome that first day was a hero, whether they knew it or not. They were choosing freedom over safety, truth over comfort. That is the most human thing we can do. Spring arrived with a slowness that felt deliberate, as if the land were deciding whether to commit. The first snowdrops pushed through in late February. Then the crocuses violet and gold along the lane. The days lengthened. Daniel planted the thyme and rosemary Mary had given him, and they survived. He planted more. He bought seeds, wildflowers, lavender from the garden center in Bantry, and the act of planting felt like a promise to himself that he intended to stay. But there was still work to be done. Beyond the settlements, there were other domes, other prisons. The council had built them across the globe, each one a kingdom of lies, each one full of people who had never seen the sun. We couldn't free them all, not yet, but we could plant seeds. We could send messages across the wasteland, signals saying, "You are not alone. The world is waiting. You can be free." I had to escape. On what I guessed was the third night, I made my move. When the guard changed shifts, there was a 30-second window. I attacked the first interrogator with the chains they'd used on my wrists, slamming him into the second. The door was unlocked. I ran. Somewhere above me, alarms began to wail, and the hunt began. Inside, the room smelled of damp and dried lavender, the previous owner's doing, probably some estate agent's idea of charm. The flagstone floor was the same cold stone he'd paced as a boy, memorizing his Latin declensions aloud while rain lashed the windows. He set his single suitcase down and stood in the center of the kitchen, breathing slowly. Sean took him to the pub again, and this time they talked properly, not the gentle surface talk of the first meeting, but the real excavation of it. They spoke about their fathers, both dead now, both hard men in different ways. Daniel said he'd never told his father he loved him. Sean said his father had said it once, on his deathbed, and the strangeness of it had made it feel less real, not more. Words from the dying are the hardest to hold, Sean said. I think often about Theo, who did not live to see the full flowering of the world he helped create. He died peacefully in his sleep at 87, surrounded by grandchildren who had never known the dome. At his memorial, Vera wept openly, something I had never seen her do. She placed a handful of dirt from the outside world on his grave and whispered, "We kept the promise," and we had. Every day, in every choice we made, we kept it. Days stretch into weeks. The signal persists, growing fractionally stronger with each passing day, as though whatever is sending it knows someone is listening. Elena names the transmission Echo, treating it almost as a companion in the vast emptiness that surrounds her station day and night. We recognized ourselves in it, the hologram continues. We too once looked up at the night sky and wondered if anyone was out there. We too felt the silence of the universe as a question rather than an answer. That is why we called out to you. You would understand. Some nights, she swears she can hear the signal still, singing through the cosmos, calling out to someone, anyone, in the infinite darkness. She knows it is only her memory, only her imagination. But it comforts her to think that somewhere, on some distant world, someone else might be hearing it too. That one moment opened the door to eternity, to connection, to a universe that had been waiting for someone brave enough to say hello. Elena Chen became more than a commander, more than an ambassador. She became a symbol of humanity's best instincts, curiosity and courage and compassion. Because she never stopped loving him, Marco said. And love that deep, that silent, becomes a kind of prison. She could not speak of it without breaking. He reached over and hesitantly brushed a strand of hair from Sophie's face. His touch was warm, rough with calluses, and it sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cooling air. She leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her shoulder. I want it, she said, her voice breaking with joy and relief and the terrifying beauty of choosing herself for once. Marco held her close, and when he kissed her, she tasted wine and sunlight and the bittersweet memory of two lovers separated by an ocean of circumstance. That night, after the last guest had left, Marco led Sophie to the old oak tree at the vineyard's highest point. He had hung lights among its branches, hundreds of them glowing like earthbound stars. I wanted to do this properly, he said, his voice nervous in a way she had never heard before. He lowered himself to one knee, and Sophie's hands flew to her mouth. Dragon weavers had possessed the ability to channel the draconic essence that flowed through the world's ley lines. Their magic was not born of study or incantation, but of resonance, of tuning oneself to the primal frequencies of creation itself. When the dragons fell into their long slumber centuries ago, the dragon weavers had scattered and intermarried, their gifts fading to whispers of what they had been. But the bloodline endured, dormant, waiting for one worthy to carry the took downward, through corridors lit by torches that burned with a blue-green flame that gave no warmth. The walls were covered in script, ancient dragonweaver runes that pulsed with a faint, desperate light, their glow weakening as the group descended. At the bottom of the final staircase, they entered a chamber that took Kira's breath away. The vault was a domed space the size of the Iron Hall Market Square, its walls covered in the same runes, its floor dominated by a massive circular She tucked the letter into a silk pouch and gave it to a merchant. Heading east, then she climbed to the roof of the inn and looked out over the city. Somewhere out there, the road continued. India, Arabia, Africa, a world so large it had no end, and a girl a woman with no intention of stopping. The compass was buried with James, as he requested. But some say the needle still moves, pointing toward the city that waits in the jungle. Others say the jungle itself protects the city, that the spirits Fawcett feared still guard its gates. In Manaus, sailors speak of ghosts in the deep jungle. The Brazilian authorities closed the case after 3 years. Sarah's disappearance joined a long list of unexplained vanishings in the region. Explorers, treasure hunters, missionaries, and indigenous people who ventured too deep. The locals knew better. They called the area the Valley of Echoes, where the spirits of the dead called out to the living. The letter was never opened by his family as he requested. It was buried with him, alongside the Golden Compass and Fawcett's final journal entry. 3 secrets, bound together in a grave in Oxford, pointing forever toward the jungle where they all began. The compass was buried with him, as he requested, but the needle, it is said, still moves, pointing not north, not south, not east or west, but somewhere else entirely, a direction that has no name, toward a place that exists outside of space and time. The world was not perfect. There were still conflicts, still inequalities, still people who clung to power and lies. But there was also hope, growing stronger every day. New generations raised in freedom, unburdened by the fears of the past. New ideas, new possibilities, new dreams. The sky was no longer a ceiling. It was an invitation. The next 48 hours were chaos. Sector 7 erupted in protests. Workers abandoned their posts. Wardens defected rather than fire on unarmed crowds. The council's grip slipped, one sector at a time. In the underbelly, Theo coordinated with resistance cells across the dome, preparing for what came next, the opening of the dome itself. It was time to see the real sky. He received a letter from his daughter in Toronto. "Dad, I can hear in your letters that something is shifting. You don't sound fine, but you sound like you're finding your way to something true. Don't rush it. Mom would tell you to slow down." He read it 3 times, then put it in the kitchen drawer where he kept things too precious to display. He wrote back, "I am learning to be still. It is harder than any scholarship I have done." The countdown reaches 0 on a quiet Tuesday, by ship time. Elena has barely slept in 3 days, her eyes fixed on the sensor arrays, her heart pounding with anticipation. Through the station's external cameras, she watches reality itself tear open before her eyes. Webb read the last line she had written, and in the end, the killer was the one who stood to gain everything from her silence. He looked up. The window was open, snow drifting onto the sill. Below the window, a narrow ledge ran along the manor's stone foundation. Webb pulled the ransom note from his pocket. This note was written on Eleanor's own stationery. The paper, the ink, they match her desk. That means either she wrote it herself, or someone in this house had access to her private study. Richard set down his cup with a sharp clink. Anyone could have taken stationery from the library. Margaret frowned. But why? Why would she want to disappear? Webb smiled grimly. Because she was being blackmailed. I found a hidden file on her desk, a ledger of payments, thousands of dollars over 2 years. Someone in this house knew her secret and was draining her accounts. He looked at each face. Richard approached Eleanor, his voice trembling. All these years I thought you didn't love me. But you stayed because of the children, Richard. Our sons. I stayed for them. But I could not stay any longer. Harold's betrayal was the last straw. Richard hung his head. I understand. I am sorry. Power. The headmaster was a woman named Thessaly, ancient and sharp-eyed, who had once been a dragon weaver of considerable renown before the academy consumed her years. She tested Kira's abilities with a series of exercises that left the girl exhausted and trembling, and when the testing was complete, Thessaly pronounced her potential as a fourth circle weaver, a rank that most students took 3 years to achieve. Your gift is raw, but it is deep, Thessaly said. Studying Kira. The temperature plummeted. Eleanor flickered and retreated toward the wall with naked terror. He's here, she whispered. The thing that took my family. Hide. Do not look at it directly. Do not let it speak your name. The lights died. All of them at once. Absolute darkness swallowed the room. It was Jahan. He stood in the doorway, his dark eyes unreadable. For a long moment, neither spoke. I have a daughter your age, he said, quietly, who wanted to be a warrior. He turned and walked away. He did not ask who she was. He did not tell the others.